you guys. Good morning. Increased obesity, metabolic dysfunction, hypercholesterolemia, type 2 diabetes mellitus, increased cardiovascular morbidity, hypertension, risk of stroke, increased rates of motor vehicle crashes, higher rates of caffeine consumption, increased risk of toxicity, overuse of caffeine, non-medical use of stimulants, lower levels of physical activity, increased risk for anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, poor impulse control and regulation, increased risk-taking behaviors, emotional dysregulation, decreased positive affect, impaired interpretation of social emotional cues in self and others, decreased motivation, increased vulnerability to stress, cognitive deficits, especially more complex tasks, impairment in executive function, working memory, organization, time management, and sustained effort, impairments in attention and memory, deficits in abstract thinking, verbal creativity, decreased performance efficiency and output, lower academic achievement, poor school attendance, and increased dropout rate.
What are we doing to cause all of this? How can we stop it? Where do we start? Start with sleep. We first presented this topic in early November of 2014 as an issue analysis for the Central New York Teacher Leadership Program. Between November and December of 2014, the issue had become a movement. You can see the headlines appearing, spanning a change at the local, state, national, and international level. In New Jersey and Oregon, Connecticut and Florida, in Korea and in Australia, sleep is becoming a priority. Sleep is vital for everyone. Sleep as a health crisis gained significant attention after the debut of the National Geographic's Sleepless in America documentary on November 30th, 2014.
Let's begin with the basics. Sleep has long been understood as necessary, but unknown as to why. Each night, our pineal gland, a pea-sized gland in the center of our brain, produces a hormone, melatonin, at high levels to make us sleepy. The timing of this production is dependent on many things, but mostly it depends upon our age. As we age, we produce less and less, and when we are growing, the time of peak production varies. After the age of 3, melatonin production drops as we age approximately 10% per decade and levels off to the lowest concentration in our 60s. At the onset of puberty, the timing of melatonin production begins to shift. Melatonin levels peak later and later in this stage we call adolescence, creating what scientists call a delayed sleep phase. This chemical control the onset of sleepiness and the ability to sleep later in the morning is controlled by the pineal gland's timing of melatonin production. The levels are still high, but they peak later than someone above the age of 20. Delayed sleep phase has been identified as beginning with the first pubertal changes and ending at the average age of 19.5 in females and 20.9 in males. These circadian rhythms are the natural sleep cycles of our middle school and high school students. Biologically, most of them have difficulty falling asleep before 11 p.m. and waking before 8 a.m. These findings are not new. Scientists have been publishing this discrepancy in melatonin cycles for years. Many listen and retain the knowledge, but are not compelled to make any changes in the expectations of our teens. Last October, a team of scientists from the University of Rochester published some alarming findings about the human being's need for sleep, and it has caused a windfall of comparable and identical findings, as well as formal recommendations and a plea from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Let me explain. Inside the brain and spinal cord is a fluid called cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. It surrounds the cells in the brain and circulates only between the brain and the spinal cord. Regular body cells are surrounded by a fluid called intracellular fluid, or ICF, and its job is to pick up the debris or waste products that the body cells dump out and circulate them back to the veins to be processed out of the body by various organs. Because the cells of our brain are not surrounded by ICF, the waste products that our brain cells make, all in a day's work, sit in the cells until they can be flushed through the cerebral spinal fluid and into the ICF of the cerebral blood cells, and ultimately out of the body. The limiting factor of waste removal in our brain is the space needed for the waste to flow out of our brain cells and into the cerebral spinal fluid, and ultimately into the interstitial fluid. Natural sleep increases this interstitial space by 60%. A sleeping brain allows the CSF to wash through all of the brain cells, allowing the garbage of the brain to be removed. We must sleep to get the garbage out of our brain. While we sleep, our neurons shrink, and the surrounding glial cells swell, picking up the cellular waste through cell-to-cell transfer. This cleans our brain. What is this garbage that needs to be removed? They are neurotoxins, identified to be alpha-synuclein, beta-amyloid, and tau. These three neurotoxins are associated with the development of neurodegenerative diseases, namely Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, as well as documented brain cell death. The high levels of these neurotoxins in the brains of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients are thought to be the causes of the disease themselves. Upon further note, complete sleep deprivation will kill a test animal within a week because of these accumulated neurotoxins. What are we doing? In an age and an era where we have the best nutrition, health care, and information on development, why do we continue to ignore the science and remain with a convenient schedule for the adults? We are not teaching grit. We are neglecting our children's well-being. The American Academy of Pediatrics sees this as a health crisis, and their recommendation encompasses 5 major proposals. Educate children and their parents about the necessity of 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep and the harms of caffeine consumption as a temporary treatment of drowsiness. Healthcare professionals in and out of the schools must be aware of sleep needs for adolescents and act in an advisory capacity. Education intervention for parents, adolescents, and the public should be developed and disseminated, including the broad span of risks from chronic sleep loss. Healthcare professionals should guide and educate school administrators about the benefits of instituting a delay in start times of no earlier than 8:30 a.m. as a highly cost-effective countermeasure to adolescent sleep deprivation and sleepiness. Pediatricians should provide education and support for parental involvement in setting bedtimes. Dr. Tony Moy Prince of the University of Pennsylvania writes, "Sleep loss contributes to irritability, aggression, inattentiveness, and diminished psychomotor vigilance. The negative impact of sleep loss on physical and mental health places a strain on our healthcare system and a large financial burden on our economy." We asked the parents of Liverpool High School and elementary students about the sleep habits of their children. This is what we learned from the parents. High school parents report 96% are getting less than the recommended 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. 62% are getting less than 8. Middle school students report 65% are getting less than the recommended 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. 34% are getting less than 8. Elementary school parents report 99% of the students are getting the recommended amount of sleep. We asked the health office at Liverpool High School to survey students coming to the health office during the school day about their sleep patterns. In a 5-week survey, this is what we learned. 80% of the students going to the health office for medical assistance did not sleep more than 8 hours the previous night. 40% of the students slept less than 7 hours the previous night. 34% admitted they came to the health office specifically to get some sleep, not because they felt ill. Finally, we asked the high school students about their sleep habits. 52% have stated that they have fallen asleep in class. 28% are depending upon caffeine products to keep them awake. Let's hear what they have to say.
I'm not getting enough sleep on school nights.
I'm getting close to enough sleep on school nights, but not enough.
I think I get like 7 hours of sleep on school nights. No. Just flat out no.
No, I wouldn't say that I'd be getting enough.
I do not believe I'm getting enough sleep on school nights. I feel like if that you should be getting 8.5 to 9.5, I'm probably getting around 7.5 to 7.
Not as much as I should, probably.
I feel like I could get more sleep, so I do not feel like I'm getting enough sleep on school nights.
I am not getting enough sleep on school nights.
I don't think I'm getting good enough sleep because I'm almost late to the bus like pretty much every day, so I'm probably not getting enough sleep.
I would say no.
It's hard to get to bed like before 11.
I am not getting enough sleep, not even close.
Yeah, that's a very funny joke. If you like, honestly, it's a very funny joke.
None of our friends are, and we do not know anyone that does.
Yeah.
No, I'm not either.
I am not getting enough sleep on school nights. I actually have a sleeping problem, and like I have to be on medication. But I feel like getting up at 6 in the morning to get ready for school is not really helping that. So no, I'm not getting enough sleep.
I don't get enough sleep either. On weekends, I normally sleep like 10 hours. Then I feel well rested. But sleeping like 5 doesn't really do much for me. Around 12 or 1 o'clock, I go to bed around 11:30, 12. Did around 11 to 12.
11, between 11 and like 1 in the morning.
I normally go to bed around like 10:30, but I normally don't fall asleep till midnight.
Midnight to 4 in the morning.
I go to bed at 10.
I go to bed at 11 to 11:30.
Sleep at probably 10:30.
At like 11 o'clock, sometimes 11:30, and then I read, sometimes till midnight.
Usually about like 11:30.
Try to go to bed around like 9:30, but that never works, and I'm usually up until like 10:30 to 11.
Average school night, I go to bed at around 11, but if it's like a night I have marching band or like a big project, I won't go to bed till 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah, same. I'm usually in bed at like 12:30, which is still late, but like last year, junior year, I was up at least till 2 a.m. every single night. So this year is better, but it's still pretty late. Like
Around 11.
11:30, 11.
Midnight, usually.
1:30, but other nights 12.
12.
Last year was like 1:30. This year, usually maybe 11.
I haven't had breakfast on a school day since maybe middle school, 7th grade.
I would rather not eat breakfast if I could sleep longer.
Every day.
Yes, every day. I never have breakfast.
Yep, I haven't had breakfast in years. All year I have not eaten breakfast once. Honestly, I do skip breakfast sometimes just to get an extra 20 minutes of sleep.
I never miss breakfast to get more sleep.
Yeah, I don't eat breakfast in the morning.
I don't have time to eat breakfast.
It's breakfast every single morning. There's not a single morning I eat breakfast.
Sometimes I do miss breakfast just because I'm so exhausted and I can't get up in the morning.
Yeah, same. I miss sometimes because you want to sleep that extra like half an hour.
Yeah, I skip breakfast too to get that extra 20, 30 minutes. And, sometimes I regret that because it has me asleep in the first block, so.
and I don't get enough food. I'm really hungry when lunch comes.
Every morning I set my alarm so I'll be able to eat breakfast, and I always hit snooze, so it never happens.
I think in the beginning of the day, I'm tired, but like once I get going, I'm fine.
Not focusing enough on what the teacher is saying, so maybe not getting all the notes that I need.
Like during classes, I'll fall asleep. Like all honesty, I'll fall asleep, and then I'll wake up 5 minutes later, and it's like, wow, I just skipped a big chunk of class, like the main part.
I don't know. I think it's part of life. You just have to deal with it. And I mean, you'll get behind on sleep. You'll be really tired, but really, I don't know. I think it's just have to deal with it.
Like, I'll feel really drowsy and I'll have trouble paying attention, or my handwriting will start to like get sloppy and I can't read what I wrote because I'm just fighting to stay awake. And
I used to fall asleep in class, my first block class, which I'm not happy about.
I fall asleep first block.
Yeah.
I cannot keep my eyes open at all.
I fall asleep in some of my classes, and then I miss what the teacher is saying. It's not that I'm doing bad, but I definitely feel like it's harder to focus. Yeah, it's hard to pay attention and like actually understand what is being taught. Yeah, like it all depends like what class you have too, but I know for me like it's harder to focus that early and get ready to school and have to think.
I tend to like drift off, zone out. Like it's just like an attention thing. Like I'm very like observant and like I pay attention, but like it's so hard to when all I can think about is wanting to go home and sleep.
I find that I drink more coffee in the morning to try and stay awake, but it doesn't really work because I always end up like dozing off in class and my mind wanders off.
Sometimes I can pay attention, but then sometimes I'm just like totally drained and I don't really know what's happening.
Yeah, I can't really focus a lot when I don't get enough sleep at night. Kind of like half asleep in class, half listening. It's kind of hard to function.
It's hard for me to focus in school because sometimes I'm like really tired.
Eyes are getting heavy and I'm getting like really tired and I can't concentrate.
Well, whenever I get more sleep than usual, I can definitely feel it. I feel more active and reactive to what the teacher says. And when I'm sleepy, it's hard to concentrate. And
I'm very affected by my sleepiness during school. I am in first block and I'm like a zombie. I try and keep myself awake, but I just feel like there's like this like headache in my head sometimes.
I feel like sometimes I can't concentrate because I'm tired.
yeah, lack of concentration is apparent.
Like for me, my first block classes is usually not my lowest grade, but one of the classes I don't really try in. Most of the time because I'm tired.
Grades would be higher, people would generally be happier, there would be a lot less complaining in the school about being exhausted.
A, students would get more sleep. B, they'd have breakfast to wake up their brain. And C, they'd be able to pay attention better in class.
And I wouldn't get sick as often because I tend to get sick when I get stressed, and the stress is because I don't have enough time to get my work done.
This has been such like a huge thing talked about for like a really long time, and I firmly believe that it would help.
It's a good idea.
I'm definitely on board with the 8:30 idea.
Be more awake, be more active during class. Probably they'll participate more because they're more focused into what's going on because they're more awake.
We're not just a bunch of teenagers who don't want to wake up in the morning and go to school. We're people who don't get enough sleep because of school and whose school career is affected by that.
Does Liverpool really have a problem?